and welcome to this special here on Headlines today with a man who's in the news for the right and wrong reasons. The right reasons, his book India Shastra, a collection of his articles is out. The wrong reason is because there is a murder probe into the death of his wife Sunanda Pushkar. Shashi Tharoor, appreciate your joining us. Typical of a journalist, let me first focus on the wrong reason for a moment, to the extent that how deeply has this affected you personally and politically? The entire controversy over Sunanda, where has it left you?
Look, I mean, I'm not talking about this matter for the simple reason that there is a police investigation on and one is obliged, I think, to respect the
I'm not going into the specifics of the investigation.
On the question of myself, obviously it's been extremely hard. You know, I've led a rather sort of long life of integrity and decency, and to see some of the things that are being said and alleged by all sorts of people naturally becomes very painful. But at the same time, there are adversities in life that always come in unexpected ways and from unexpected quarters, and I've always believed it's how you face up to them that ultimately reveals your character. So I'm facing up to this, doing my job, doing what I can, cooperating, needless to say, fully with the investigation, and at the end of the day, ultimately, I think my faith in the truth is what sustains me. That and a completely clear conscience, which obviously is an asset in facing up to this kind of injustice.
You seem to be talking as if you feel that you're a victim in some way. Do you feel a victim of a media trial? Or, I mean, because your critics are saying that you should answer your questions.
Of course I'm answering the questions of the police. Why should I answer the questions of self-appointed media judges, prosecutors, executioners, all rolled up into one?
Silence is seen sometimes as proof of guilt.
Well, why should it be? I mean, the fact is that when there is an ongoing investigation, one is not supposed to do anything that compromises the investigation. And needless to say, public discussion of matters that are being gone into in depth by those who are professionally tasked with going into it, that public discussion merely vitiates the atmosphere, renders a fair conclusion impossible. That's why one side of this witch hunt has proceeded in precisely the manner they have. I actually have a chapter in this book written well before the recent eruptions called Our Free and Irresponsible Media, and it's written mainly in sadness because I am myself a child of the media. My father worked for newspapers and magazines all his adult life, and I grew up literally with newspaper ink in my veins, as it were. So for me, seeing what has become of our media, which is something I've always been a staunch defender of. I spent a lot of time in the United Nations standing up for freedom of the press and standing up for the rights of reporters and journalists in some of the more difficult situations in the world. So I find it hard to see this profession having plumbed the depths that it has in our country.
But the media says it's their duty, their responsibility to raise questions. The police raises questions. It's the police which has declared it a murder probe. It's not the media which has declared it a murder probe.
The police have said they're looking into a particular aspect, but they have by no means come to a conclusion of that nature. It's a very open-ended probe. And as I said, I'm not going to get into the merits of all of this by the back door, Rajiv. So let's talk about the book.
I'll come to the book, and I won't go through the back door. Let me just say what's in the public domain, which is that you yourself, right at the start, said you don't believe Sunanda would have committed suicide. That's a public statement. Do you stick by that statement?
I stick by everything I've said. I don't have a habit of backtracking on any of these things because obviously one has feelings. But you know, the fact is I am a bereaved husband who's not been allowed to mourn. I've been the victim of a public spectacle which honestly has shown a tremendous lack of decency and civility on the part of certain people. I think we should leave it there for now. Let the police do their work in peace, though they haven't been given very much peace by the media. And at the end of the day, once the probe is over, I'll be quite willing to speak as appropriate. But at the moment, there is a process going on, and that process must not be interfered with. I'm not going to answer anything more related to this matter.
There's just one last part, which was part of your public domain, which also affected you and, in a sense, when you were minister, you had to resign over the IPL, and that's been again brought back. Amar Singh and others who've been questioned by the police have also raised this question. Shashi Tharoor's dealings with the IPL could have something to do with Sunanda.
I've had nothing to do with the IPL since Sunanda's involvement in it in 2009. Nothing whatsoever.
Even
other than watching occasional games on television.
Nothing.
Nothing.
You don't
And
think
therefore,
IPL has
and
any
you know what
rights
is
to
more,
this?
Sunanda frankly has cooperated fully with the enforcement directorate's investigation. The poor girl had to travel twice to Mumbai, gave 18 hours of interrogative testimony to the ED. I think the government can easily, the police and so on, can easily lay their hands on what the enforcement directorate has had to say. As you know, there is a process in our country. I resigned essentially without any charges ever being filed against me, and 2 years later I came back into the government. So I must say that these are all matters that ought to be closed, but it seems that our media never gets enough of cricket, enough of mystery, enough of drama. I mean, frankly,
You are a celebrity. You are an MP.
I didn't seek to be any of that. I'm a hard-working member of Parliament.
If you are found dead in mysterious circumstances, the media will raise questions.
Well, the media have been raising a lot of questions. They're not going to get the answers from me. They can go to the police, who are the ones in charge of asking the right questions.
Do you feel you are friendless? Your own party, Mr. P.C. Chako, your leader, Mr. Sudhindran, in the Kerala PCC chief, all seem to suggest Shashi Tharoor should resign. Shashi Tharoor should step down.
No, I don't
till his
believe
name
that
is
the
clear.
PCC chief has ever said that. I understand from a media channel that another colleague appears to have said something along those lines, and I think that he can certainly explain himself to the party high command if he genuinely believes that, because I'm unaware of anything that I have done that makes me unworthy of the trust that my voters have placed in me as recently as the elections of 2014.
But your PCC chief, and this is connected to your book also, which is that the Kerala unit of the Congress did take strong objection to what was seen as praise of Narendra Modi. In the book also you mentioned Narendra Modi 2.0 as if to suggest Narendra Modi could move from the politics of identity to the politics of performance. Your words, not mine, at a public gathering, suggesting maybe that you're willing to give Narendra Modi the benefit of doubt.
No.
And that's where your Kerala PCC chief said that if you want to heap praise on Narendra Modi, then you should leave the Congress party.
Well, first of all, I have urged all those who believe that my words amount to praise of Mr. Modi to actually read what I've written. I think there's been a tremendous reading deficit amongst my critics generally, and the book being there in solid black and white and hardcover gives people plenty of opportunities to do so. Secondly, the question, the Modi 2.0 chapter
Yes.
is unabridged and unchanged
Yes.
from the way it appeared in the Huffington Post, when a paraphrase of it in the Indian media
Yes.
created controversy. I'm delighted
Yes,
to...
no, because you do say, you do say, does this all add up to a Modi 2.0, a very different figure in government
Question
from
mark.
Ogre some of us had feared and demonized
Question
for
mark.
years?
Does this
It is
all
still,
add up?
yes, it's a question
And
mark.
it is still too
early to tell. It
So
is still
that's-
too early to tell.
that's what I said.
So
At the
therefore
time,
you
there's no
seem
change.
to be giving the benefit of doubt is what your critics seem
No, on the
that
contrary.
you seem to be willing to reconsider your stand towards Narendra Modi. Is how your critics are looking at
Well,
it.
my critics are
and
wrong.
therefore believe that you're trying to be soft on Modi because you want some quid pro quo with the
I have absolutely...
with the Sunanda murder case. That's how they look at it.
Nonsense. I mean, frankly, there is no quid pro quo whatsoever. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't believe that anything I've said amounts to unqualified praise or unqualified criticism. What I've been is a fair-minded critic. I have said Mr. Modi has said a lot of the right things. That, in fact, his speeches and his rhetoric have attempted to harness this shift that I have traced in my last 3 books about India, and indeed my book of essays by parliamentarians, India, the Future is Now. I've traced this attempt to shift from the politics of identity to the politics of performance across Indian politics, not by one individual or one party, across Indian politics, moving away from vote for me because I am this religion or this caste or whatever, to a politics voting for me because I'm giving you
So you again see this as media misinterpretation,
Of course.
and when they try and draw a link between Shashi Tharoor trying to get go soft on Modi because you would like the police off your back, this is clearly, in your view, yet another example of the media targeting you.
It's the media's, I'm afraid, shallowness, pettiness, and in many cases malice. But coming right back to the specific issue you've raised, I haven't finished my answer.
Yes.
I believe that our entire national politics, all parties, I mean, when you see the difference, for example, in elections in Bihar, elections in Andhra Pradesh, and so on, where there is now a greater emphasis in a number of states on this message of performance and judging people by the results on the ground, I'm saying Mr. Modi's rhetoric suggests that he is trying to harness this trend, but he is using a vehicle of a party and a movement that is fundamentally illiberal and therefore cannot be the right vehicle to fulfill these liberal visions that he is articulating. And I go on to specifically, I must say, I was one of the very first people, going back to my days as a spokesman for the party, but even after I ceased to be one, who pointed out a number of his acts of omission and commission, particularly omission, when it came to condoning the excesses of his own supporters in the Hindutva movement on attacks on minorities, on statements that made minorities feel insecure.
So if he were to speak out, on those issues, would he graduate out by, so if he were to speak out on those issues, would he graduate into Modi 2.0? The point I'm making is the traditional congressman is unwilling to give Modi the benefit of the doubt. Shashi Tharoor, on the other hand, seems to be willing to give Mr. Modi the doubt, which many believe is one of the reasons why you were also removed from the spokesperson list. Because our politics doesn't have space for shades of grey. Let's be clear, it's black and white.
There is very little nuance, particularly in the way the media sees the politics. But let me stress exactly what I'm saying once again, which is that the pronouncements are fine. There are many policies where Mr. Modi is simply following through on what the UPA has said and even initiated. There are many examples. The Jan Dhan program, for example, is a UPA program rebaptized. The Indo-US nuclear deal, the BJP government conducted a vote of no confidence against the UPA. I beg your pardon, BJP opposition conducted a vote of no confidence against the UPA. Today hails the very same agreement as a national triumph and a diplomatic coup for Mr. Modi. You're seeing the very nuclear liability clauses insisted upon by the BJP now being diluted by Mr. Modi, as the UPA would have wanted to do at that time, and Mr. Modi claiming it as a triumph. So when Mr. Modi does things that we tried to do, when Mr. Modi advocates the very GST that he had opposed and his party had bitterly opposed during the 5 years the UPA tried to get it through, you want me to stand and say that that Mr. Modi is wrong? No, Mr. Modi is doing the right thing in following UPA policies which we tried to do. However, when you look at the other things he's saying, when he names, for example, a model village scheme, when he names a Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, when he comes up with Make in India, my questions are very, very proper questions for an opposition MP. How can you name new schemes, new projects, visions, sound bites, photo ops without a budget attached, without an implementable action plan, and without an executing authority? And my point is, you cannot get results with photo ops.
Can I come to that specific? Can I come to that, one of those specifics? You, when Narendra Modi announced your name in the context of Swachh Bharat, you actually suggested that the Clean India campaign was a positive step. You agreed to participate once he put your name in that campaign. Now you are saying the campaign is hollow.
No, I said it there.
As it doesn't provide a big picture. Where are we ultimately going to dump the garbage? It almost seems that you first celebrated it, you embraced it, and then because your party pushed you into a corner, you decided to go back.
Rajdeep, the irony is that you guys don't do your homework. The very day I was in Bucharest, Romania, the very day that I accepted the Prime Minister's invitation by Twitter, I published an article on the NDTV website, which is my sort of regular, or irregular rather, column on it, which has been used in my essay on Swachh Bharat in this book.
That, yes.
And the fact is that in that thing I said then everything I'm saying now. I have not in any way added or subtracted to my message. I said even by Twitter.
Again, you seem to be suggesting you're a victim of soundbite journalism.
I am very much a victim of soundbite journalism.
There is selective journalism which is taking place. No one is seeing the nuances in your arguments.
Our television media culture is only about the soundbite, the sensationalism, the breaking news. In my tweets accepting Mr. Modi's thing, the very tweet accepting it, there is a second tweet, you can check the Twitter feed, saying, however, I don't believe in photo ops. If all this is a bunch of grandees picking up a broom on Gandhi Jayanti, who will not pick up another broom till the next October 2, it's not going to work.
So you don't see yourself as isolated, ostracized by your own party and reaching out tentatively towards the BJP. That's not going to happen. Shashi Tharoor is not going to become a Krishna Tirath or a leader who's going to switch sides. Surely.
Absolutely not, Rajit, because you see, my views on bigotry, Hindutva, the divisive politics that the BJP has long built its track record on, have gone way back before I became even a Congress candidate or a Congress MP. My paper trail, as the Americans call it, is 30 years old. I've been publishing books and articles and making speeches. I'm not going to suddenly give up on a lifetime of principles and values and suddenly become somebody else that the media is trying to create.
Because, you know, again, a line taken from your book. With Narendra Modi, the nation's new Prime Minister, dominating the political scene, there are signs that the nation is moving in direction that will benefit the people. Now, if that line is taken from the book and is put out, let's say, in the Kerala Congress in Thiruvananthapuram, you are going to be seen as someone who is switching sides.
I'm not switching sides. I'm acknowledging when right things are done. Thanks to Mr. Modi's majority, he's getting through a number of UPA things that we were not able to get through. The Bangladesh Land Boundary Agreement was one of the first things sent to my committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, when I became chairman. We had tried to get it through, the BJP had resisted it. The BJP had the numbers to block a constitutional amendment. We thought it was the national interest to do so. Now that he is there with his good majority in the Lok Sabha, the very same agreement his party had objected to, he is now sending to the committee concerned, and we have been able to work with other parties to give him a unanimous support on this issue. Now, to my mind, that's how the nation must move forward in the right direction.
Do you support him on the Indo-US summit and the initiatives that he's taken, for example, with US President Obama?
Listen,
do you believe it's a step in the right direction?
Anything that is good for the country, I will support, and the Congress party will, broadly speaking, support. Now, I have not seen the fine print of the agreements of this. You and I are speaking a day after Mr. Obama has left.
Yes.
So don't hold me to things I've not fully been able to digest. Our committee has not been briefed yet by the foreign ministry on what happened.
But is it a positive step? Have you seen him in foreign policy surprise you by the deftness with which he's operated? Or are you now worried that if you give me an answer of the kind that you'll suddenly be sat upon by your partymen?
No, listen, I've always had the view that in our country, our political differences stop at the water's edge. We don't really take our foreign policy differences to that extent because, frankly, our political differences are on domestic policy. For the most part, there's been continuity in Indian foreign policy from one government to the next. And in the last 20 years, every party practically has had a share of government.
No, I take that because you've seen congressmen yesterday, after the Obama speech, almost euphoric that President Obama has told the government of the day, abide by religious tolerance, reminded them of Article 25 of the Constitution. And in your book also I sense that somewhere, that the spirit of bipartisanship, which should be there, actually doesn't exist in practice.
Well, on that particular point,
yes.
I have myself written an article to say more or less what you've just summarized, except that I've also added, of course, we don't need Americans to tell us these things. We in the opposition have been saying it. But Mr. Modi doesn't listen to us, he may listen to his friend.
But should the Congress party be celebrating but should the Congress party be celebrating the fact that a US president comes to India and criticizes, in a sense, the government obliquely? Should that be a reason to celebrate? Do you believe that there is a need for your party also to introspect?
No, but let me say something.
Are we caught in this bias?
Why do we act as if Mr. Obama's only audience is in India? He is accountable to an electorate in America. He has, after all, a lot of liberals there who are not happy about the dropping of the old negative attitudes towards Mr. Modi that the successive American governments had. After all, it's very unusual that the State Department has named Mr. Modi at one point as somebody who was guilty in their view of violations of religious freedom, and now there's a bromance going on, as the Indian media calls it. So very clearly Mr. Obama was signaling also to his domestic constituency that he hasn't forgotten the things that people were upset about. So let us also see, every time an Indian Prime Minister like Mr. Modi speaks abroad, most of his audience is really here. And don't forget, when Mr. Obama speaks in India, a lot of his audience is there. I mean, the fact is that when there is an ongoing investigation, one is not supposed to do anything that compromises the investigation. And needless to say, public discussion of matters that are being gone into in depth by those who are professionally tasked with going into it, that public discussion merely vitiates the atmosphere, renders a fair conclusion impossible. That's why one side of this witch hunt has proceeded in precisely the manner they have. I actually have a chapter in this book written well before the recent...
Hello and welcome to this special here on Headlines Today with a man who's in the news for the right and wrong reasons. The right reasons, his book India Shastra, a collection of his articles, is out. The wrong reason is because there is a murder probe into the death of his wife Sunanda Pushkar. Shashi Tharoor, appreciate your joining us. Typical of a journalist, let me first focus on the wrong reason for a moment.
is what sustains me. That and a completely clear conscience, which obviously is an asset in facing up to this kind of injustice.
You seem to be talking as if you feel that you're a victim in some way. Do you feel a victim of a media trial, or, I mean, because your critics are saying that you should answer your questions?
Of course I'm answering the questions of the police. Why should I answer the questions of self-appointed media judges, prosecutors, executioners, all rolled up into one?
Silence is seen sometimes as proof of guilt.
Well, why should it be? And decency, and to see some of the things that are being said and alleged by all sorts of people naturally becomes very painful. But at the same time, there are adversities in life that always come in unexpected ways and from unexpected quarters. And I've always believed it's how you face up to them that ultimately reveals your character. So I'm facing up to this, doing my job, doing what I can, cooperating, needless to say, fully with the investigation. And at the end of the day, ultimately, I think my faith in the truth.
To the extent that how deeply has this affected you personally and politically? The entire controversy over Sunanda, where has it left you?
Look, I mean, I'm not talking about this matter for the simple reason that there is a police investigation on, and one is obliged, I think, to respect the
I'm not going into the specifics of the investigation.
On the question of myself, obviously it's been extremely hard. You know, I've led a rather sort of long life of integrity.